welcome to the Team ABF podcast, and for today's episode I am joined by Hamish Maguire. So Hamish, nice to meet you, finally, even if it's virtually. Just a quick one, Hamish, can you give us a sort of brief introduction to who you are for the listeners and to get an understanding of where you came from and what you stand for, to be fair, mate?
Yeah, so my name is Hamish, obviously. I think, the reason that I'm here would be through the bodybuilding part of my life. And I've taken it on and kind of run with it. It's not something that I think came naturally to me. I was very much an unfit person for most of my life. I'm 27 now. I think I started going to the gym when I was about 19. But there was a lot of time doing not very much, wasting time, spinning wheels. A lot of that was because I kind of thought I knew best, and I would read on forums and whatever. So I knew what I was talking about.
Yep.
If you asked me, but the results didn't show themselves, basically.
Right.
I would kind of do the typical up and down diets, where I'd get way too fat, try to bulk, and then lose any muscle I got the couple of times I tried to diet off.
Right. Okay.
Turning point for me was kind of, I think it was about three and a half years ago, I moved back to Edinburgh. I was living in London for a while for work. I moved back to Edinburgh, got in the job I'm in now. I work in IT, so unrelated to fitness. So I kind of got my job and decided I was in the position to take it a little bit more seriously. In terms of, I had the career down. I had I had the time to dedicate to it, and I was like, I'm not doing anything else. So
a job like that, you're probably just not sitting about doing nothing, but you're sitting about for most of the day, I can imagine.
I mean, there was a joke in the office about we took on a lot of people straight out of uni. I went somewhere else and then came back, but there was a joke about how in the first year working there, everyone put on like a stone.
Absolutely, mate.
It just is.
Look, I've experienced that as well. The job I'm in currently, I went from being I've always done PT and it's been a passion. Due to life and trying to get a house, having a steady income was what I needed. I had the exact same thing. As soon as I was in that job, it was like a year down the line, I was like, oh, bloody hell, put a stone on it already. And everything else just goes to the side because jobs take over. Yeah,
exactly. Well, I mean, so a little bit more context. When I was down in London for about a year and a half, and I was trying to get more into it and was seeing a little bit more progress because after uni, so, have a little bit more money to spend on food and all this kind of stuff. But I was struggling actually with, I didn't like it down there, and basically ended up taking, I think it was like 6 months off the gym totally.
All right,
so when I moved back to Edinburgh, I was basically untrained, or maybe 6 to 9 months, and started from scratch. But yeah, the big turning point for me was deciding to hire a coach. Because it was I made the commitment that I was like, I'm going to give bodybuilding a shot, proper bodybuilding, like goal of getting on stage eventually.
So just on that is probably a good one. So what was your inspiration to get into bodybuilding as such? So not just going to the gym and maybe putting a bit of size, or even just trimming down, leaning out a bit. What was your inspiration to say, right, I want to stand on that stage and see what it looks like?
Well, it came in phases. So when I first got into the gym, when I was 19, I was like obese at the time. The way that my brain works, when I start something, I go all in, like to the extreme.
Right, I can imagine.
And I think that's
I'm probably similar, to be fair, because when I first started, I was 16, and that's all I used to do was your typical gym. I'd go to the gym for about 2 hours, didn't really have a clue what I was doing, just hit as many weights as I could, and then eat chicken, rice and broccoli, or chicken, sweet potato and broccoli. And that's what I was like as well. So I can empathise with you in that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of followed what I thought was the bodybuilding training and diet. And in hindsight, I was actually really under eating at the time. I was just trying to lose weight, and I was successful. I did manage to stop being obese, which is good.
Yeah, that's a good goal.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, after about 6 to 9 months, I was kind of like, I had a bit of muscle on me, and I was looking better maybe within a year or something. But I was like, I don't look like a bodybuilder.
Right. Okay.
So I genuinely thought that I just couldn't do it. Like,
really?
I just thought it's just like, I just wasn't supposed to do it. I couldn't look like the guys I was looking at again, because as I say, I got into it in the extreme. I kind of was looking at the Mr. Olympia competition. I watched Rich Piana's Bigger by the Day, and like
Muscle and Fitness magazine.
Super. I like the extreme end. I like the big guys. Right, that was like what I was. If I could look like that, that would be the dream. But I just thought I could do it. So I kind of parked it, and for a couple of years, I just kind of I trained more. Not for fun, but like to look good naked kind of thing, like beach bod kind of.
Yeah, definitely.
And then I found out, this is about in time when I decided I was going to get on stage. It was about, as I say, about 3-4 years ago. I just accidentally on Instagram found out about Jordan Peters, or Trained by JP. And he's a big coach, obviously down south, and he really broke down on like it was a science, but it was relatable science level of just how to build muscle, like an extreme amount of muscle. He wasn't talking about how to look good at the beach. He was talking about how to get like big.
Back to like Dorian Yates size and Ronnie Coleman,
that type of thing.
Peak, that size.
Yeah, that type of thing. I mean, if you look at Jordan Peters, he's a guy who is like, he's like 5'6" or something like that, and he got up to over 300 pounds.
Oh, like, absolutely.
Yeah, a guy that small being that big is ridiculous. Like, but he broke it down in this smart way. He had a forum which I signed up to, and he really they talked about everything, and they broke it right down to a level that anyone could understand. And I was like, okay, actually maybe I could give this a shot. Like, I just my ideas before weren't quite right. My concepts on training were a bit off. I didn't understand concepts like intensity, which is, I think, important for really building significant amount of muscle mass. Things like food, I realized I wasn't eating enough. Like, probably overtraining as well, doing like 6+ days a week of like, hypertrophy training, not getting enough rest. So
periodization, really setting up a proper plan of, right, this is what I'm going to use for my strength phase, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just started applying it, and through that forum found my coach, Stephen Cassidy's Evolution Coaching on Instagram, just because he'll appreciate the plug, I'm sure. But
definitely.
I started working with him, and basically just all clicked into place, and just my body just really quickly went from not that much to I mean, it's not like it's still way off where it's going to be, which will come to in the future, but it did do a rapid turnaround, and the transformation's pretty extreme, really, in terms of, they're mostly in terms of muscle mass, but in strength as well, and just general performance has gone up. But yeah, I mean, and that kind of takes me to the last year, and that's when we decided we were gonna step on stage.
Good.
So I actually wanted to compete the year before.
Right. Okay.
But Stephen basically told me, he was like, you could do it.
Yep.
But I wouldn't be that competitive.
And that is for being, and on that side of things as well. So when I go back to it as well, for me, that was what I was like when I was 16, first in the gym. Probably didn't have a clue. Training 6 times a week. Used to play football, so I'd train twice a week for that, play a game, and round that I would be in the gym at least 6 times a week, thinking I was doing the right thing, but clearly wasn't. And back then, again, the reason I got in was same as you, sort of beach bod, looking good when you're on the beach and stuff like that. And then realising, actually, I'd like to try bodybuilding, step on a stage. And then for me, I can't remember who it was, somebody was one of the sort of bigger guys like Dorian Yates, something like that. And it was about genetics. We were talking about, like, if you step on stage and your genetics aren't right, you're not going to be anywhere close to where you think, mentally you think, I can do that, but in reality you're not. So unluckily for me, my right side of my body is slightly smaller than my left, and the biggest difference you see is in my pecs. So my right pecs, like, massively smaller than my left.
Right.
And that was always what got me. So I was training, thinking, right, I'm going to build up. I'd like to step on stage. Heard that one little thing mentally. As soon as I heard that, that switched me off from actually trying to follow and step on stage. But I've always tried to follow the training, because the training is what I loved. Because it's a great method in putting your body through the ringer as such to get as much muscle mass on as possible. Because the difference is that if you go back to pictures when I'm probably 16 to when I was like 21, 22, when I was really concentrating on it, is amazing. The amount of size I actually put on. Again, at the time, I never really tried to lean down. It was always just about get bigger. Because I'm 6'2", so I thought, right, instead of being a skinny, weak, lanky, I've got to get a bit of size on me to really look in proportion as such. So that's where I thought about stepping on stage, but never did, because it was genetics for me.
Well, I mean, that was, I can relate to that, in that I did genuinely a few years ago just believe that I just would never do it. Like, as I say, like, I just didn't think it was in my cards.
Yeah.
And I still think that, really, if I'm being hypercritical of my physique, like, it's still, there are much better genetics out there. Like, I've got standout weak parts, but
right, okay.
What the way of getting around that is just, in my mind now, it's just, I've just got to outwork it.
Oh, like, absolutely, mate. It's all about work ethic, isn't it?
Yeah, it might take more time, and there are parts of my physique, like for me, like I've got naturally a very wide hips and wide waist.
Right, okay.
And I realised that even when, like, at the end of my prep, so I was, like pretty lean, right?
Yeah.
The actual physical width of my hips didn't get any thinner. If you looked at me from the side, it was very, very thin, but just, you can't change your bone structure.
No, definitely. Pelvis is your pelvis at the end of the day, isn't it? That's one thing we're stuck with.
And it took a bit of, I've recently kind of accepted it, but it was frustrating at the time, because in bodybuilding you want the illusion of the smallest waist possible and bigger shoulders. The
V shape, isn't it? And come for your shoulders and the waist, and then back out at the quads. And
exactly. And the reality is for me that I can still do that, but the way that I do that is by just making my shoulders and back even bigger. Like that's the
monstrous back and shoulders.
That's effectively the goal eventually. Yeah. And it's unfortunate for me that, like, my back's one of my weak points at the moment. I think that's been through training, but it's something that I'm working on at the moment. But that's kind of the focus, and that's why, is to build that illusion.
Yeah, no, definitely. Good man. So on to the next bit about that then, about bodybuilding and such. So what is your biggest achievement within bodybuilding? So is that from where you started to where you are now? Is that your biggest achievement, or is the biggest achievement actually stepping on stage at the back end of last year? So what is it? What would you class as your biggest achievement to this point?
I think that's a good question. I think if there wasn't COVID, the biggest achievement would have been the transformation, just in terms of, like, physically. Because genuinely, I mean, the thing is that if I look back at, like, pictures when I was like 18 and through my teenage years, there just aren't that many pictures, because I hated how I looked. Like, I didn't take any pictures of myself. Didn't like people taking pictures of me. They just don't exist. There isn't a before picture, because there's no way I would have been caught dead with my top off.
Right,
like,
okay.
There's no way.
To be fair, mate, that is why I wanted to get you on as well, because seeing the difference through some of your posts to where you are now is inspiring as well, because to see how dedicated you are to it and where you've come, and even through the back end of last year.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. So I think at my biggest, I must have been around about the 20 stone mark as I say, totally untrained. I'm 5'10", so I was a big guy, right?
Yeah.
And like, as I say, you know, that's not a 20 stone like gym 20 stone. That's, you know, literally couldn't, you know, run to catch the bus kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
But like if I look back at that, I'm like, that's pretty good. But for me, it's been a pretty gradual process. So it takes me sometimes to look at the pictures and go, you know what, it's pretty good. You know, and I've got the kind of scars to remind me of it, in that I've got like a little bit of loose skin on my stomach.
Right. Okay.
It's not drastic, but you know, it is there, and that is from being very large.
Okay.
But yeah, if there wasn't COVID, that would have been my biggest achievement. But I'd say that going through with a prep last year was something that I'm very proud of. Because my initial show was going to be the PCA Scottish show. So PCA is a bodybuilding federation.
Yep.
They do a show near Glasgow every year, and it was in April, and I think it was about 4 weeks before the show. So I'd been dieting for the whole year. Started the diet on the 1st of January.
Okay.
1st of January till gym shut. I you know, didn't have a cheat meal.
Yep.
You know, everything was absolutely meticulous, perfect.
Yep.
You know, missed the social events, didn't go out, didn't have a drink, blah blah blah.
Yep.
And then it got cancelled because obviously the gyms got closed. And I didn't even think about the COVID thing, to be honest. Like, just that bit, the fact that I'd dedicated, at that point it was like 3 and a bit months or something like that, to this goal that I'd had in my head for like obviously the 2 years before that.
Yeah.
Absolutely wrecked me.
I can imagine, to be honest. I can imagine.
Yeah. But a lot of people that I knew kind of were like, right, just going to call prep on the day, you know, call it a day with prep, and that, you know, just take the year off kind of thing, which is fine. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But I was like, no, I said that I was getting on the stage in 2020, so I didn't. So, you know, I've trained at home for a while, and then I think it was just before English gyms opened, because the English gyms opened before the Scottish gyms, quite a bit before that.
Was that not July, a bit back? End of July, like that, wasn't it? It was like summer.
Yeah, it was a bit that. Yeah, it was good for. It was at least 4 weeks before I was dead.
Definitely.
So when they did that, they announced they were going to put on a bodybuilding show, the same federation. They were going to put on a first timer show, which obviously I'd qualify because I've never been on stage before.
Yep.
And it was originally down in Hull, and I was like, you know what, I'll do it.
Yeah.
The Scottish gyms weren't even open yet, but I was like, I'm gonna go for it. I managed to get an arrangement where I had some use of a training facility, thankfully. But I just got stuck back into it. So, you know, as like the world started opening up, and people were able to go to the pub and whatever, I was like, no, I was going in training in a place in silence at night because we weren't technically supposed to be there.
It was against the guidelines as such.
But you know, I did it, and then in October, you know, got on stage and placed third in my competition. So, it was pretty intense. Like the whole year just was this weird.
And I think that's
weird for everyone, but
definitely, I think that's one thing I found is it's weird for everyone, but from seeing what you were doing through social media, so pretty much your Instagram, to still be dedicated to that goal, not knowing, because they might have never had a competition, or
like a week out they were talking about cancelling it.
Yeah, but to see how dedicated you were to that kind of shows you how much tougher it must have been for you specifically, because bodybuilding training is hard enough, and you've got to be on point, like sacrifice everything. And I think that's what some people don't understand as well, is that you literally have to sacrifice every single thing for that goal to look the best when you step on stage. So even that one meal 3 months ago that you had that you shouldn't have had, can play in your mind, which then obviously can have a negative effect on your body. So
yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about, but that's how you've got to treat it. You know, especially when you start your prep, which normally is like between 12 and like maybe 16 weeks out. I mean, preferably before that, really 365 days, you know, every 365 every day of the year, you should you know, be on the diet, and there's no chance to miss a meal or miss a training session or whatever. And I appreciate that that's pretty mental for most people, because
it is.
I'm talking about like not having, you know, never having I don't think I've had a bar of chocolate just randomly gone to the shop and I'm like, I'm going to have a Twix. I don't think I've done that in the last 2.5 years. I think I've done it once.
I think that is dedicated to the cause.
It's obviously to an extreme.
Yes, but then I think the thing is as well, what you find is, as you mentioned earlier, that you're the kind of guy that goes all out. Doesn't matter what it is, you're in it, so you go all out. But then you just become conditioned to that. You become conditioned to saying, actually, I don't want chocolate.
Yeah, that is what it's like, and there's something weirdly. I find it quite therapeutic. Just I don't choose what I eat. Right, like my coach does a diet plan for me.
Right. Okay.
And he's a nutritionist is his main thing.
Yeah.
So it's a good balanced diet, and there's plenty of greens and etc. in it. But and there's good variety in it as well. But that's what I eat, and I don't choose it. And maybe once a week at the moment I get an off-plan meal, and I'll pick what I want. But I like that. I like that I don't have to think about what I'm going to have for dinner. I like that, and I don't have to worry about. Yeah, and then I don't have to worry about if it's going to take away from the goal, or if I'm doing like say a flexible diet approach. I don't have to sit and think about the macros and all that kind of stuff. I just eat. That's just what I do. And
you've got your bit of paper with that's meal one's this, meal two's that, and it's as long as the measurements are correct, ingredients are correct, then you have no thoughts. I think that's a big one as well. From my position as being a PT, obviously I advise people. So I would do the opposite way. I don't give somebody a diet plan as such and say, right, this is what you're eating. I advise them, say, right, this is what you should. This is your calories, macronutrients.
Yeah, I think that's good for gen pop.
Yeah, so that's your general population. You go and eat this. That's what you need to try and achieve. Blah blah. And if you do that, you will then filter down throughout the weeks. And if it is weight loss, then you'll hit this point if you've done that correctly. So that's what I think people find hard as well, is going to thinking, oh, what can I eat? Oh, right, what am I going to have this? They don't understand sometimes that you've got to have the boring meals of rice, chicken, and a veg.
Yeah,
you can obviously spice it up a little bit, but you've got to be like that. You can't be sitting there. I'm going to scan this packet of crisps. All right, I'll have that packet of crisps. That works into my macronutrients, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing for me. Is I think because I don't try and do things like fits your macros, which, as I say, I think it is good for most people who are trying to live like a normal, normal stuff.
Joe blogs and such.
But for me, the fact that I don't have, as I say, like a packet of crisps. I don't want a packet of crisps because I don't think about having a packet of crisps, because it's just not an option. So it doesn't cross my mind.
Yeah.
And so I don't miss them.
Yeah. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's what I find as well.
Yeah.
If I get into it and I sit down and make myself a diet plan and I'll follow that, you start to find actually that makes it, as soon as I eat that bar of chocolate or that packet of crisps, I feel worse after it. Yeah. Because it's not what you should be eating, it's not necessarily healthy. So
there's a mental part of it as well as the physical part of it. Like
absolutely.
We all you can feel a bit guilty having a packet of crisps or a chocolate bar or whatever. And I know that that's not necessarily a healthy relationship with food to have, but that doesn't change the fact that most people, if you eat a big bar of chocolate afterwards, they always say, "Oh, I wish I hadn't eaten that bar. I probably shouldn't have eaten that." Kind of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the one thing as well, is I've always, you see it if people say, I've got to do my 12 weeks, and they build up to this point and saying, like, in 12 weeks, I'm going to give myself this treat at the end or a cheat meal at the end. That's where it becomes worse as well, because throughout that, say the first 8 weeks, it's that sense of anticipation of, right, at the end of this, I'm going to have X, Y, and Z. You might at that end of the 8 weeks instead of 12 weeks, you might have something you shouldn't necessarily have. That's when you overindulge. You've missed the boat because you've kind of went too far. It's a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I see it a lot in bodybuilders, especially in first timers, and I can't criticize it because, you know, if that's what you do, then that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with it, really. I mean, well, it's arguable, but you know, I see a lot of people like have stashes, so they'll do their 12-week prep or whatever, and they'll see the limited edition Twix, orange Twix or whatever, and they'll put it in their box. They'll get, you know, be through Easter, so they'll put an Easter egg in their box. You know, they'll buy those, like, you know, your 1,000-calorie cookies you get from like My Cookie Dealer or whatever. Put them in the freezer because, you know, it's that rare one that they're not going to get again, and then you justify it. Then you get to the end of your show, you know, or it could just be an extreme diet phase or whatever. You reach your goal, and then you eat, you know, 10,000 calories worth of chocolate in a day.
Exactly.
Like, one, you're not going to feel good the next day, but two, it's going to be so much harder to get back in the diet after that. You know, that's when people then fall off, and they then feel really bad about themselves because they've, like, you know, you'll blow up with water weight and all that, so you won't look as good. And then they'll be like, oh, I've ruined it. So they'll eat because they feel bad about themselves, and then don't train properly for like a couple of weeks, and it all just falls apart. And it's, I see it time and time again, and it's a shame. And like, it's just there's amount of, like, you just got to be kind of stoic about it. That's how I approach bodybuilding, is being stoic. You just accept, like, this is what it is, and it's like, I don't have any like junk foods in my flat because I don't want the temptation to be there, so there is none. You
don't want to, like, go into the fridge and see something you shouldn't have, like a bar of chocolate or a biscuit in the cupboard. That if you open that cupboard to go and get something stupid and you see the biscuit, you know, I'm just gonna have one, and then one leads to
it just takes a bad day or whatever.
Absolutely.
And then as soon as you've done one, it's a mental game of them being like, well, I had one yesterday, maybe I could have one today, or you go down the other route where it's like, oh, I've had one, so I might as well have the whole packet, like I've ruined it, kind of thing.
I've already fell off the bandwagon, so I may as well just have a whole packet and blow it out the water instead of just burn that extra 70 calories throughout the day.
Exactly. Or and then you get like patterns of like doing extra cardio, and it's just a big mess. And it's
it is.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I've been there and done it. Like, that was, you know, me back, as I say, when I started, and I didn't really know what I was doing. That's the kind of thing I would do. You know, I'd do, like, it wouldn't be as long as a full prep, but, you know, that's when I would cheat on the diet and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And it took a long time to learn how to avoid it.
Yeah, I remember I used to go to Nando's and thinking, again, inexperienced, didn't really ever have a nutrition. Anybody guiding me nutrition. The nutrition guidance I got was from the Muscle and Fitness magazine or Flex magazine, stuff like that. You'd read it, okay, so I need to eat X amount of rice, X amount of chicken, and whatever it is, your veg. And then get through the week, you'd have that all day. I'd be prepping, I'd have it 3 times a day at work, and then at home. Get to the weekend, what we doing the weekend? Nando's, let's go to Nando's. And then you buy the full platter because you think, all you think is all the chicken that has protein. But not in reality thinking, you've got a large chip, you've got a large garlic bread with this chicken, which is a mountain of chicken alone. The whole chicken, easy 600, 700 calories maybe, probably more. And then all these carbs, it's just crazy. And that is what I think people aren't educated in actual nutrition and how simple it can be. Don't get me wrong, it's still a difficult and an intricate sort of topic, especially for bodybuilding, because you'll know it's the small things you can tweak. So your sodium intake, water intake, all does have an effect on your body when you get to the extreme end. But for the general public, actually it's very simple. You take in X amount and you burn X amount, then you're going to be fine. You know what I mean?
Exactly, 100%.
another one for you, just in terms of training, we obviously spoke about before we started. Back to the gym, so gym's open again this week. I guess you were very excited about that as soon as Sunday night's game. I did see that in your stories that you were packing up the old home gym, get that in the bin, get hidden away from it so you don't need to see that ever again.
Yeah, it's all on the cupboard. Hopefully I never have to come out. But yeah, no, I'm
gathers dust.
Super happy. Yeah.
What's your training look like at the moment? So when you started back in at the gym, are you treating this as a new phase of your training, or are you just sticking with what you've been doing the past since you were in the show?
Somewhere between the two. So my coach did give me a new plan to follow, but it's only really a modified version of what I was already doing.
Just to fit in with the gym, is that just so you've got machines and X, Y, and Z?
It's actually just to target specific my weak points more.
All right, okay.
So in this case, it's adding slightly more volume for me to back and shoulders, which is my the bits that we were kind of talking about that I need to bring up. Just adding a little bit more workload, but fundamentally I follow like a push-pull legs split. I was doing pre-lockdown, I was doing 3 on 1 off, so push-pull legs off, repeat. This time I'm doing, because there's slightly more volume, I'm doing either 2 or 3 on instinctively and 1 off. So basically, if I'm feeling really beat up after the second day, take a rest and then resume.
And do you think that
during lockdown,
does that help you thinking, right, actually I need to take a rest day, or do you prefer having a planned rest day?
Well, I mean, because it's still semi-planned, right? So I know that either every third or every fourth day I'm going to have it off. And I kind of know after the session how wrecked I'll be the next day. Like I knew, for example, I took Wednesday off, and I did deadlifts on Tuesday, and I was like, absolutely gutted. I was like, there's, trying to train legs the day after that, especially the first leg day back in the actual gym. I was like, I felt physically run down on Wednesday because I just obviously was hammered. So that's where for me it's easy decision. At the moment, like my food isn't changing massively between rest and training days. Sorry, my dog's there.
Don't worry. I've got one as well. I know what they're like. I know what they're like.
But yeah, I mean, during lockdown, I was doing 2 on 1 off. Again, push pull legs, but we were doing a lot more volume to try and kind of combat, not a lot, but a bit more volume to try and combat the lack of weight and exercise variation we had. Me and my training partner kind of did it was a push pull legs, and because we were doing more volume, took slightly more rest, so 2 on 1 off.
Good. Good. Yeah. So you enjoy being back in then? That's amazing.
Oh yeah, massively.
Better than the living room.
Not even comparable. Like,
no, definitely isn't. Definitely isn't. It's all one of them. It's you think it's all fun and games at the start as a novelty, but that novelty soon wears off.
Yeah. I mean, it's a weird one. I had a lot of people kind of say, it's better than, could be worse, and it's better than nothing kind of thing training at home. And I invested quite a lot in kit. I had a proper Olympic bar. I think it was like 175 kilos in weight, including the bar. By the end of lockdown, kind of built it up over time, but it's just not the same. It's just not. It's not even ballpark the same as being in the gym with the intensity and like the. I'm also. I prefer training alone for the most part. I like training with someone now and again. I like training alone. It's kind of my time by myself in my head.
Your sanctuary.
Exactly. But during this lockdown, I got one of my friends. We were kind of training partners through the whole thing. He also trained with me through my prep.
Right.
But I needed that external motivation, and normally I don't.
Right. Okay.
But I needed him to be there to kind of, so I didn't, after a couple of sets start getting bored or start thinking this isn't the same and this isn't good. But and that was kind of. That kind of showed, I think, the difference in lockdown training for me, and that I needed that.
So I guess you're internally motivated most of the time. It's just pretty much in this past lockdown that you had to get out that small bit of external motivation to push you along. That probably, to be fair, mate, that probably leads into sort of the next part of the podcast now that what I chat about is mental health. So obviously, as we spoke before as well, on Sunday you put up a post about going back to the gym on Monday, and it was just sort of briefly noting about your mental health, that it's not been the best during that lockdown and stuff. So what benefits do you think training has on your mental health?
I think it's like, it's what keeps it together. Like, you know, I'm someone who's definitely suffered with pretty bad mental health through retrospectively, like through most of my life, but certainly through my adult life. I've had some, you know, been in some pretty dark places, kind of thing, and for me, it's been training that's always pulled me out of it, even when things weren't as serious. And I think the more serious they got, generally, the better my mental health actually got.
Right. Okay. And is that just because it was more? Is that because it's more of a structured side of things, or is it that training that gives you that sort of boost?
A combination of things. Like, I think the endorphins and stuff from training is obviously good for everyone's mental health. Like, just full stop, everyone can benefit from that. But it kind of, for me, was more of like the structure, and then you've got like mini goals. So, like every session you go in, and like I use a logbook, so it's like I knew last week. I know that I've got like. Yeah, so I know that I've got like a PB to beat, right? I've got like a number of reps I have to get, and like the satisfaction of doing that it is like instant gratification. It makes you feel good that you did it.
Absolutely.
And that was good. Yeah, and to be honest, it's kind of just that there's a sense of purpose to it all. Like you know that, like especially with bodybuilding, as we kind of talked about, it's a very kind of 24/7 sport in a way because of the diet. Plays into it. You know, I know that everything is going towards this one goal. So like, I eat the meal, it's going towards the goal. Do my training, even like, you know, I'd have to hit a certain number of steps a day. So like, if I go for a walk, it's all towards the goal, and that's like a very rewarding thing. You know, it gives you a really strong sense of purpose, kind of thing.
Yeah, good. So, just on the back of that one, then, so. The past year, obviously, we've already touched on as well. The past year being massively different to what we've ever experienced, and it affecting everybody in different ways. I know I've been affected throughout it with certain things. And we touched on it briefly as well, but your training throughout that, right? And then having that point where it was like, right, shows are cancelled. As soon as whatever, I can't even remember the date. It feels like that long ago, the 23rd of March last year or whatever, when they came out and said, "This is what we're doing." Did you ever think that was going to have an effect on how you feel and your sort of mental health? And does that then say lead into why you try to stick to that goal so that you could help yourself throughout that?
Yeah, I think so. The first and I'm going to say second lockdown. I know there have been other stages of lockdown depending on where you live in the country and all that, but I'm going to refer to as first and second. So first for me is the original lockdown. Second one is the one that started Christmas Day.
Yes,
it's when they closed gyms again. That's what's important to me is gym closures.
Absolutely.
The first one did devastate me for like a week. I mean, I was just not having a good time, right? Like absolutely in the gutter. But I managed to just kind of pull out of it. I don't know. I'm not sure how or why, but I just kind of got on with like weird home workouts. I guess the novelty was kind of there. I was doing, you know, mad, like push-ups with resistance bands and like seeing how many every day. I was seeing how many push-ups I could beat and that kind of thing. And then started getting a bit more kit. So like I remember like my order came with like strength shot plates. So I had like you know, a bit more weight for the first time. That's exciting. And then when the prep, I was also in really good shape, which helps as well because like it was motivating that I was in good shape. So that was motivation to not then just pass it all off and like
lose what you've worked for.
Exactly. And so I did find, and as I say, when the show got announced, I got in the gym a little bit, or I got in I was able to train earlier than maybe some other people were, and there was a sense of like, obviously that was kind of cool. It was like Fight Club, like when I like talk about it kind of thing.
Don't mention it that you're even coming to this place, whatever the name is.
Exactly. But second lockdown was very different for me. I was about 5 weeks into my gaining phase, kind of post show. So I'd done my recovery in terms of like my metabolism was back to like firing properly. I was eating a good amount of food, but not being too fat, but not being too lean either. And my strength was at an all-time high. I was in literally every time I went in the gym was hitting a PB, like significant PBs.
Right, okay. That's obviously something you want to be doing. So
and I mean, I was kind of coming off the high of the show in terms of like, I'm like, right, I'm going to really go for it. Like, really, like next time I go on stage, going to be significantly bigger. Blah blah blah. And then they closed it. And I mean, I went into the gym on Christmas Day. I never thought I'd be that guy. Never in a million years would I thought I'd be the guy that goes to the gym on Christmas Day. I was there at 6 a.m. so that I could still do Christmas with like the family and I went there 6 a.m. by myself. I think there were a couple of other guys came in actually, and you could tell that everyone kind of had this kind of somber mood about them because like they knew that this was going to be like the last session for a while. Let the dog in. It was weird. And then when we started training, again, I was training by myself, and I was in a garage at the time, had my kit, and it was absolutely freezing, and I just didn't enjoy being there. In the first week, I think I did something to my pec. I don't think it was I definitely popped some kind of fibers.
Right. Okay.
So I couldn't like pick up a plate, like, because my pec was like, I don't know what had happened, but it wasn't in a good spot. But because that was mostly because it was so cold, and then I was at this peak strength level, so I was like benching. In this case, it was bench like 120 kilos or something like that. But I think I was getting like 10 plus reps, which for me was like really impressive.
That is impressive. To be fair.
And it just went like I felt it, like something happened, and then it just I couldn't train chest for, it was like 6 weeks or something ended up being, but and even then eased back into it. But it just absolutely wrecked me that I couldn't go to the gym. Like I was in a really bad spot, and it took there's kind of significant changes in my life, and ended up in a position where I moved the gym kit into my living room, and started training with my friend Hanan. And we both were people who at that point were living by ourselves.
Right. Okay.
We both worked from home, and it kind of was this, like, for both of us, there were times where it was like our only face-to-face social interaction with someone for the day. And that massively then improved my mental health. So I went from like this really bad place to getting better. There's still the sense of, obviously it's not the same.
No, definitely.
And it's not.
Definitely.
But I mean, that made a huge difference.
And it's quite interesting how small things like that can change from being in such a position where you're down in the dumps, kind of, and then just being able to see at least one person or train with one person can just lift you that significant amount to keep you going and obviously work towards that goal. So no, that was good. It's good to hear you getting back to where you think you are, or where you want to be, not where you think you want to be, where you want to be. That's just good. Yeah. So future, what does the future look like for you? So everything, just in terms of shows, goals, anything you have, what does it look like?
I mean, so short-term goals are competing again this year. So I'm going to compete in the novice class. So I did a first-timer show last year. Bodybuilding shows then have a novice class, which is where, depends on the federation, but effectively, it's for newer people. not quite ready to stand on stage with the big boys yet. So I want to do that this year.
Good.
And it's kind of one of these things that if you compete for a couple of years, you're expected to stop competing in novice. Like,
right,
for,
right.
There's kind of a due, you only do it for a couple of years and then you need to move on to the big class and give everyone a shot. So this is my chance to kind of do that.
Right.
I was going to be competing in a show in Aberdeen in the middle of August, but they're not doing a novice class this year, which is frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And part of the issue with the novice class is if you compete in the open bodybuilding show, you can't then go back to a novice class. So if I, for example, this Aberdeen show, go and step on stage with the bigger guys, slightly smaller show, Granite City Classic, if you look them up on Instagram, if anyone's up in Aberdeen kind of way. But it looks like a really good show. But if I go on and step on stage with like Class 1 or whatever they call it, or men's bodybuilding tall, 2 weeks later there's a PCA Scottish show, which is the main one that I want to shoot for, because that's the show that got cancelled last year. That's that was supposed to be my first show. And so if I'd have to compete in the men's class there, and the standard of that show is very high, right? Like the last 2 years winners who won it in men's bodybuilding, which is Greg and Andy, who are 2 Scottish bodybuilders. They're both in line for their pro cards this year.
Right. Okay.
It's like,
it's a different level.
It's a different playing field, and it's not all about winning. It is about like taking part in that, but like it's also not about being completely. I don't want to get completely wiped out. Like, there's no fun in not competition. Yeah,
like for anybody that's not really aware of bodybuilding, I'm not an expert on it but I do know enough that being like that, so a novice class is like being a junior football player. And then the men's bodybuilding is probably like the Premier League or the Scottish Premiership. And then you try and step up. There's a big difference.
Yeah, there's a huge difference. And so my first show now is going to be end of August. I think it's the last weekend of August in Hamilton. That's PCA Scottish. I'm already qualified for the PCA British finals based off the first timers show.
All right, okay.
That carried over because there wasn't a British finals to qualify for last year because of COVID. So they carried that invite over. Hopefully I qualify as a novice and not, because at the moment I'm qualified as a first timer. So if I'm qualified as a novice, then that's cool. So potentially doing that in October. Kind of depends on how I look in August though. If I feel that I'm not basically big enough, I'll call the prep a day, wrap it up, and then I can focus on growing
for the October show.
Well, potentially wrap up for the year.
Right, so you wouldn't go to the British finals then?
It depends on how I look, basically.
Right, okay.
So I won't decide straight away. I'll maybe give it a couple of weeks to let it sink in and stuff. But look back critically and be like, right, how much can we improve until October? Is it worth competing in the British finals? Because it's way more competitive, and again, it's like you're sacrificing a huge amount of that point in prep, right? Like like the last few weeks for prep are misery, right? Like outside of the gym, you can't function. Like struggling to like do my desk job kind of thing. Obviously, hopefully no one from work hears that, but I mean that's the reality of it. But like,
nobody notices it when you're sitting there, not picking up any calls or tasks because you can't function.
Yeah, exactly.
But, hope that's that'll pass.
Like, But if I can avoid doing that, and if I don't feel it's worth it, I'm not going to do it.
Right. Okay.
But hopefully I would, because it would be a good experience to obviously go on the British final stage. Just for the experience part. Also, I made some friends through the first show that also qualified. They're going to be there, so I kind of want to go and see everyone again and get wired in. That then kind of leads into kind of more future plans, which is the next step really is after the shows this year, I'm going to take all the next year off to just grow. So I'm not going to compete next year. I'll take at least a year, potentially 2 years off to to get to the point where I could go on like the men's bodybuilding stage and not be outsized. So it's going to take a long time to do that. We're talking a full year in a calorie surplus kind of thing.
A lot of people don't realise that as well, that it's not, because when you start looking at pro Mr. Olympia, the guys, Phil Heath, he was about 40, wasn't by the time he actually won it. So he wasn't a young man as such.
Yes.
It's about growing and maturing to a point where actually I've got as much size as I want.
Like a young pro bodybuilder, like a young one would be like 25 is like very young. Like most are like 30, early 30s, and then you're not normally competitive even as like a pro until you're like 35. So these guys that potentially, some of them start competing when they're like 16 years old, and you've done potentially 20 years of competing, and maybe you're a professional, but you're still not even at the top of the ranks kind of thing. I mean, my long-term goal right now like isn't to turn professional as a bodybuilder. If I could, amazing. Like if I get that chance, I will go for it. But I'm realistic in that I'm very far away from that right now. Like very far away. So I want, I'll do everything I can to compete at as an open bodybuilder, but it's going to take a long time. So my like bodybuilding goals are, I would like to be Mr. Scotland at some point. So win one of the, like an overall Mr. Scotland, just so I could, like that
just
sounds
to
cool.
say I've done it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and some of the competitions you win a sword. So like, if I could win a sword,
you got to have a sword in the mantelpiece saying that I have been Mr. Scotland.
Yeah, pretty much stop there. Like,
just park the bus. You know what? I'm going into a calorie deficit, and I'm going to lose everything I've worked towards.
Yeah, exactly. No, obviously not quite, but that would be a realistic. That's like still a stretch goal. Like that is still a hard thing to achieve. But that's more realistic than saying I'm going to be like a professional bodybuilder. But kind of related to, I guess, like the more professional side of things, although not, it doesn't make me a professional bodybuilder, is working more with the supplement company I'm involved with. So I got the end of last year, I got quite a unique situation because I work in IT. I understand just basic corporate IT stuff. I mean, that's not actually what I do for a job. I work in a very like niche thing to do with IT security. But I, on a broad scale, understand fundamental, IT kind of stuff. And my coach was working with this company, Supplement Needs, to set up an education forum originally. And he realized that Supplement Needs were just struggling to manage workload because they'd grown hugely as this company. They'd gone from, Lee, the owner, started in his bedroom selling stuff on Amazon, through to now they're this, they've got a huge product range, like they're, expanding massively, and they hadn't scaled up yet, basically. So it was like, come down and meet Lee, who's the owner, and the rest of the guys. Turns out the rest of the guys is literally two other guys in the warehouse. So this whole and like for what how well the company was doing in terms of like innovation and products and like innovation in supplements, and they're really big proponents of the quality side of things. Got to be. It's all fully transparent labels and all that kind of stuff. They just were. You could see they were like, Lee would like didn't sleep. Like he's just really busy, like incredibly busy. And so he kind of opened up this discussion, and he was like, I obviously want to be like a sponsored athlete, because you wouldn't want to be a sponsored athlete, but I'm not in the position where I don't have a big enough influence anyway, obviously, on Instagram to warrant like a significant sponsorship or something like that. But I have these set of skills that supplements could directly benefit from. So we basically came up with this sponsorship, and it's a sponsorship and not an employment contract, because that's a whole different kettle of fish that I didn't want to go down.
Yep.
I don't want to be moonlighting, you know, and kind of contract stuff. But I can be, you know, my title is sponsored athlete / technical advisor. So, you know, I have this, you know, a sponsorship, and as part of that, I get to travel with the company. So I'm going to get to go to like the UK Arnold Festival.
All right. Okay. Good.
Like the FitX Festival. Or Expo, sorry, and get to like be on the booth and help people like talk about products and you know, kind of rub shoulders with like bigger name guys, kind of thing, and make those contacts.
Absolutely. Good.
So yeah, want to keep pushing that. And we are launching the education site, which is originally what I kind of was brought on to, but it expanded into the rest of the company. But
good.
Yeah, it's probably. Yeah, I'll plug that more when it's out, because it's not actually live yet.
Still working away at that. Right. Good.
Yeah, soon.
Brilliant. Just so before we sort of wrap up, is there anything you want to add? So this is your time just to plug what you want to plug and go for it.
Yeah. Just if anyone's made it this far, good job, and. Give me a follow on Instagram and send me a message. I'm Hamish Maguire _. But yeah, just you know, if anyone has questions about some of the stuff that I've talked about, we can go into it in further detail.
Definitely.
You know, I'm not a coach. I'm not trying to be a coach, at least not at this point in my career. But you know, I can still give advice and general kind of tips, whether you're kind of just starting out or you're wanting to make that transition into the kind of being a bodybuilder, or say you're at like a hyper, you know, you're very overweight and you're wanting to make a change. You know, I've been there and done it. That and plug my sponsors again, so Supplement Needs, and stay tuned for the Supplement Needs Education Forum, which is going to be it's going to be a huge source of knowledge on nutrition and training and all the bits about bodybuilding that maybe people don't like talking about, and kind of health implications and that kind of stuff.
The taboo part of bodybuilding that probably shouldn't be taboo, because if it's done correctly, then there's no need for it to be taboo.
Exactly. And that's very much what we're really focusing on in the education site is dispelling the taboos and getting rid of the bro science and breaking it down to real applicable science that's sustainable for a long period of time and that kind of thing.
Good. Brilliant, mate. Well, thank you very much for your time. That's been a good episode, and to see an insight into where you've been, what you've come through, and obviously all the tips that you've given out there and stuff. So brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thanks.